I used to think friendship meant something. I used to believe that when someone called you their best friend, when they shared their deepest secrets with you, when they cried on your shoulder about their relationship problems, it meant they actually cared about you as a person. I was so naive, so trusting, so fucking stupid. My name is Emma, and for 23 years of my life, I lived in the shadow of my best friend Sophia. Beautiful, confident Sophia with her perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, and effortless charm that made every room she entered revolve around her like she was the sun. And me? I was the moon. Only visible when she wasn't shining, reflecting whatever light she threw my way, grateful for any attention at all. Sophia and I had been inseparable since middle school. While other girls were experimenting with makeup and dating, I was struggling with severe acne, thick-rimmed glasses, and a body that seemed determined to betray me at every turn. I was awkward, shy, and completely invisible to boys. Sophia, on the other hand, had been turning heads since she was 12. She never made me feel bad about it directly. That wasn't her style. Instead, she'd offer to do my makeup, suggest flattering outfits that somehow made me look worse, and give me dating advice that never seemed to work. "You're so lucky you don't have to worry about all this drama," she'd say, gesturing vaguely at her phone buzzing with messages from various guys. "You get to focus on the important stuff like school and your art." I'd smile and nod, pretending that being overlooked was somehow a blessing, that my academic achievements and creative talents were enough to fill the hollow ache in my chest every time I watched her get asked out, get flowers, get chosen, always chosen. The thing about being the ugly friend is that you become an expert at reading people. You learn to notice every micro-expression, every subtle shift in tone, because your social survival depends on it. You become hyper-aware of how people's faces change when they first meet you versus when they meet your beautiful friend. You memorize the exact moment their eyes slide past you to focus on her. You catalog every conversation that dies when you speak, every joke that falls flat, every time someone asks you to take the photo instead of being in it. But you also learn to be useful. You become the confidant, the supporter, the cheerleader. You're always available to listen, to give advice, to provide a shoulder to cry on. You make yourself indispensable in all the ways that matter, except the one way you desperately want to matter. And somehow, you convince yourself that this is enough. That being needed is almost as good as being wanted. Sophia had been dating Marcus for almost 2 years when everything changed. Marcus was, God, even thinking about him now makes my heart do this stupid little flutter that I hate myself for. He was tall and lean with dark hair that always looked perfectly messy, like he'd just run his fingers through it. He had these intense green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and when he smiled, really smiled, not that polite stranger smile, it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. But it wasn't just his looks that drew me to him. Marcus was kind in a way that felt genuine, not performative. He'd actually listen when I talked about my art or my writing. He'd ask follow-up questions, remember details from previous conversations. When Sophia would dismiss something I was excited about, Marcus would encourage me to tell him more. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. Of course, he was completely devoted to Sophia. Why wouldn't he be? She was everything I wasn't. Confident, outgoing, effortlessly beautiful. They looked perfect together, like they'd stepped out of a magazine. And I was the third wheel who tagged along to their dates, the friend who sat across from them at dinner pretending not to notice how Marcus's eyes lit up every time Sophia laughed, how his hand would find hers across the table, how they'd share those intimate little glances that made me feel like an intruder in my own life. I told myself I was happy for them. I told myself that what I felt for Marcus was just admiration, maybe a tiny crush that would fade with time. I told myself a lot of lies back then. The first crack in my perfect facade of supportive friendship came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. I was in my apartment, working on a painting for my portfolio, when Sophia burst through my door without knocking. She'd had a key for years, and I'd long since given up on privacy where she was concerned. "Emma, thank God you're here," she said, her usually perfect makeup streaked with tears. "I need to talk to someone, and you're the only person who really gets me." I set down my brush and turned to face her, automatically shifting into best friend mode. "What happened? Are you okay?" "It's Marcus," she said, collapsing onto my couch with dramatic flair. I think I'm getting bored with him." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, trying to process what she'd just said. Bored? But you guys seem so happy together. Sophia waved her hand dismissively. That's the problem. It's also predictable. He's sweet and reliable and safe, but where's the excitement? Where's the passion? Sometimes I feel like I'm dating my brother or something. I stared at her, this beautiful, privileged woman who had everything I'd ever wanted, complaining about the very qualities that made Marcus so special. The kindness, the consistency, the genuine care. She saw these as flaws. He brought me flowers yesterday, she continued, and all I could think was how boring they were. Roses, Emma. Basic red roses. No creativity, no surprise. And when he talks about our future together, all I can think about is how suffocating it sounds. My hands clenched into fists in my lap. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and make her see how lucky she was. Instead, I heard myself saying, maybe you're just going through a rough patch. All couples do. Maybe, she said, but I could see in her eyes that she'd already made up her mind. Or maybe I'm just settling because he's safe. You know what I mean? Like, he's the kind of guy you marry because he's stable and dependable, not because he sets your world on fire. The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. Marcus wasn't just stable and dependable. He was intelligent, funny, creative, passionate about his work as a graphic designer. He volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends and always remembered to ask about my art projects. He was everything any reasonable person could want in a partner, but to Sophia, he was just boring. Have you talked to him about how you're feeling? I asked, hating myself for still trying to salvage their relationship. What's the point? Sophia said, examining her manicured nails. It's not like he can suddenly become more exciting. Some people are just naturally more, dynamic. And some people are more suited to quiet, comfortable lives. She looked at me then, and I saw something in her expression that made my stomach drop. Pity. She was looking at me with the same pity she was talking about Marcus with, like we were both unfortunate creatures who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention we received. I mean, you understand, right? She continued. You've never really been the type to go for the bad boys or the exciting guys. You're more of a settling type, which is totally fine. Not everyone needs drama and passion. The room went very quiet. I could hear the rain pattering against my windows, the distant sound of traffic, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Settling type. She thought I was a settling type. In her mind, I was the kind of person who should be grateful for whatever leftover affection might come my way, who didn't deserve the kind of love that set worlds on fire. Right, I said quietly. I'm more of a settling type. Exactly, Sophia brightened, apparently oblivious to the ice in my voice. So you get why I need to figure this out. I'm only 23, Emma. I have my whole life ahead of me. I shouldn't have to settle for comfortable when I could have extraordinary. I nodded mechanically, my mind spinning. This was how she saw me. This was how she'd always seen me. Not as her best friend, not as someone worthy of respect or consideration, but as the girl who should be grateful for scraps. The ugly friend who existed to make her feel better about herself by comparison. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know yet, she said, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. Maybe take a break, see what else is out there. Marcus will understand. He's reasonable like that. And honestly, he might be happier with someone more compatible. Someone who appreciates that whole stable, quiet thing he has going on. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing to give me a quick hug. Thanks for listening, Em. You always know exactly what to say. I don't know what I'd do without you. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of everything I'd thought I knew about our friendship. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at my half-finished painting without really seeing it. The canvas was covered in deep blues and purples, abstract shapes that had seemed meaningful an hour ago, but now just looked like chaos. My hands were shaking, I realized. My whole body was shaking with a rage so pure and intense, it felt like it might burn me alive from the inside out. 23 years. 23 years of friendship, and this was what I was to her. A settling type, a comfortable option. Someone so fundamentally unworthy of passion or excitement that the very idea was laughable. But it wasn't just about me, was it? It was about Marcus, too. Sweet, wonderful Marcus who loved her completely and deserved so much better than someone who saw his kindness as a character flaw. She was going to break his heart because he wasn't exciting enough for her, because he was too good to her. I thought about all the times I'd watched them together, all the moments I'd seen him look at her like she hung the moon. The way he'd bring her coffee in the morning just the way she liked it. How he'd listen patiently when she complained about her job or her family. How he'd surprise her with little gifts. Not expensive things, but thoughtful ones. Tickets to an art exhibit she'd mentioned wanting to see, a book by an author she liked, a playlist he'd made of songs that reminded him of her. And she was bored. She was bored by devotion, by consistency, by love that didn't come with drama and chaos. I picked up my phone and stared at Marcus's number in my contacts. I could text him, give him a heads up about what was coming. Warn him that his girlfriend was already mentally checking out of their relationship. But what would be the point? It wouldn't change anything. If anything, it would just hurt him sooner. Instead, I set the phone aside and walked to my bathroom mirror. The face looking back at me was familiar in all the worst ways. Pale skin still marked with the occasional breakout, mousy brown hair that never seemed to hold a style, small dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'd grown out of the worst of my awkward phase, but I was still undeniably plain, still the kind of person who blended into the background, who got described as nice or sweet instead of beautiful or striking. But as I stared at my reflection, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the rage, or maybe it was just 23 years of frustration finally finding a target. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel resigned to my fate. I felt determined. Sophia thought I was a settling type. She thought Marcus was too boring for her, too predictable, too safe. She was going to throw away the best thing that had ever happened to her because she was too shallow and selfish to recognize its value. Fine, let her. But I wasn't going to sit back and watch Marcus get destroyed by her selfishness. And I wasn't going to keep accepting that I was somehow less deserving of love and happiness because I wasn't born with perfect features and natural charisma. The plan started forming in my mind slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room. It was crazy, probably impossible, definitely risky. But it was also the first time in my life I'd ever wanted something badly enough to fight for it. I was going to change. I was going to transform myself into the kind of woman who deserved someone like Marcus. And when Sophia inevitably broke his heart, I was going to be there to pick up the pieces. Not because I wanted revenge, or at least, not only because I wanted revenge, but because I genuinely believed that Marcus deserved better. He deserved someone who saw his kindness as a strength, not a weakness. Someone who appreciated his thoughtfulness instead of finding it boring. Someone who would choose him every day, not just until something more exciting came along. Someone like me, or rather, someone like I was going to become. The first step was research. I spent the next 3 days reading everything I could find about personal transformation. Fitness blogs, makeup tutorials, fashion guides, hairstyling videos. I studied before and after photos like they were sacred texts, analyzing every detail of what separated the before from the after. It wasn't just about physical appearance, I realized. The women who underwent the most dramatic transformations didn't just change how they looked, they changed how they carried themselves, how they spoke, how they moved through the world. They developed confidence, presence, magnetism. I could do that. I could learn that. But it would take time, and time was something I might not have much of. If Sophia was already getting bored with Marcus, it was only a matter of time before she acted on those feelings. I needed to be ready. I started with my diet and exercise routine, not because I thought I needed to lose weight. I'd always been naturally thin, but because I needed to build strength and confidence. I joined a gym and hired a personal trainer, an intimidatingly fit woman named Jessica, who looked like she could bench press a car. "What are your goals?" she asked during our first session. "I want to become someone completely different," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, but let's be more specific. Are you looking to build muscle, improve cardio, work on flexibility?" "All of it," I said. "I want to become the kind of person who walks into a room and everyone notices." Jessica studied me for a moment, and I saw something like understanding flash across her face. "All right," she said finally, "but understand that real change takes time. We're talking months, not weeks." "I understand. And it's going to hurt. Physical training is just as much mental as it is physical. You're going to want to quit about a dozen times." "I won't quit." She must have heard something in my voice that convinced her, because she nodded. "Okay then, let's get started." The workouts were brutal. Jessica wasn't kidding when she said it would hurt. Every muscle in my body ached for the first 2 weeks, and there were days when I could barely climb the stairs to my apartment. But I pushed through it, driven by a determination I'd never felt before. While my body was transforming, I started working on everything else. I booked a consultation with a high-end salon and told the stylist to do whatever she thought would look best. The woman, Claire, was probably in her 50s with perfectly styled silver hair and an intimidating level of confidence. "Honey," she said, running her fingers through my limp brown hair, "you've got good bone structure, but you're hiding it behind all this drabness. When's the last time you did anything with your hair?" Trim it myself sometimes. Claire made a sound of distress. "Well, we're going to fix that. I'm thinking we take at least 6 inches off, add some layers for movement, and go about 3 shades lighter, maybe some subtle highlights to bring out your eyes." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This was it, the point of no return. 3 hours later, I stared at myself in the salon mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back. My hair was a rich, warm brown with golden highlights that made my skin look luminous instead of pale. The cut was modern and flattering, framing my face in a way that emphasized my cheekbones and made my eyes look bigger. "Now," Claire said, "let's talk makeup." She introduced me to a makeup artist named Trevor who took one look at me and clapped his hands together. "Oh, we're going to have fun with you," he said. "You've got such beautiful eyes. They just need the right framing." For the next hour, Trevor worked his magic, teaching me techniques I'd never even heard of. Contouring, highlighting, color matching, eyebrow shaping. He showed me how to use makeup not to hide my features, but to enhance them. When he was done, I looked like a completely different person. Not in a fake, overdone way, but in a way that felt like I was finally seeing my real self for the first time. The girl in the mirror was confident, striking, beautiful. "The key," Trevor said, "is practice. This look took me years to perfect, but you've got good instincts. Give yourself 6 months of daily practice and you'll be doing this in your sleep." 6 months. The timeline kept coming back to that. Everything I was doing would take time to perfect, time I wasn't sure I had, but I pressed on. I threw myself into learning everything I could about fashion, studying style blogs and fashion magazines like I was preparing for a PhD. I slowly replaced my entire wardrobe with pieces that actually fit properly and flattered my changing body. Nothing too expensive, I was still a struggling artist, but everything carefully chosen to create a cohesive, confident image. I took acting classes to work on my confidence and presence. I joined a public speaking group to get over my lifelong shyness. I read books on body language and social psychology, determined to understand the subtle art of making people notice and remember you. And slowly, gradually, I started to see results. The first sign that things were changing came about 6 weeks into my transformation. I was at the grocery store, dressed in a well-fitted pair of jeans and a soft sweater that actually showed my figure, my hair styled and my makeup carefully applied, when the cashier, a guy about my age who'd checked me out dozens of times before without so much as making eye contact, suddenly became chatty. "I love your hair," he said as he scanned my items. "Did you just get it done?" "Thank you," I said, smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Yes, I did. It looks great. Really brings out your eyes." It was a small thing, barely worth mentioning, but it felt like a victory. For the first time in my life, a stranger had noticed me, complimented me, flirted with me. Not because I was standing next to someone more beautiful, but because I was becoming beautiful myself. The changes accelerated after that. My trainer started commenting on how much stronger I was getting, how much my posture had improved. My skin cleared up completely, whether from the better diet, the exercise, or just finally taking care of myself properly. I started getting second looks from men on the street, started noticing how conversations flowed more easily when I spoke with confidence instead of apology. But the real test came 2 months in, when I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. I saw him before he saw me, sitting at a corner table with his laptop open, probably working on a design project. He looked tired, I noticed. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. My heart clenched at the sight of him looking so worn down. I almost turned around and left. I wasn't ready yet. My transformation was still incomplete, and I didn't trust myself not to give away how I felt about him. But then he looked up and our eyes met, and it was too late to run. For a moment he just stared at me, his expression confused. Then recognition dawned and his eyes widened. "Emma?" he said, standing up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. "Wow, you look different." I walked over to his table, hyper-aware of how I was moving, how I was holding myself. All those hours of practice were being put to the test. "Hi, Marcus," I said, and I was pleased to hear that my voice sounded calm, confident. "How are you?" "I'm good," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "You look amazing. Did you do something different with your hair?" "A few things, actually," I said with a small smile. I decided it was time for a change. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you want to sit? I was just taking a break from work." I hesitated for just a moment. This wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't supposed to be engaging with him yet, but the tiredness in his eyes made the decision for me. "Sure," I said, settling into the chair with what I hoped looked like natural grace. "So what prompted the makeover?" he asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "Not that you needed one, you always looked great. But this is... wow." I felt my cheeks warm at the compliment, and I had to remind myself to stay in character. Confident Emma wouldn't blush and stammer like old Emma would have. "I guess I just got tired of blending into the background," I said honestly. "Sometimes you reach a point where you realize you've been playing it safe for too long." Something flickered across his face at those words. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "I can relate to that," he said quietly. "Can you?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "You've always seemed so confident to me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Appearances can be deceiving. Lately, I've been wondering if playing it safe is just another way of giving up." My heart started beating faster. This sounded like it might be about Sophia, about problems in their relationship. I wanted to ask, wanted to dig deeper, but I forced myself to be patient. "What do you mean?" I asked instead, keeping my tone light and interested. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee cup. When he looked up again, there was something vulnerable in his expression that made my chest tighten. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "As a friend?" "Of course. Do you think there's something wrong with being predictable? With wanting stability and consistency instead of constant drama and excitement?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. This was it. Sophia had already started undermining his confidence, making him doubt his own worth. The casual cruelty of it made me want to reach across the table and take his hand, to tell him that he was perfect exactly as he was. Instead, I kept my expression neutral and considered my answer carefully. "I think," I said slowly, "that there's a difference between being predictable and being reliable. Predictable suggests boring routine, but reliable suggests someone you can count on. Someone who shows up, who follows through, who doesn't keep you guessing about how they feel." Marcus's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw something like relief flash across his face. "I think," I continued, "that a lot of people confuse drama with passion, chaos with excitement. But real love, the kind that lasts, isn't about constant emotional highs and lows. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's not exciting. It's about building something together instead of just riding an emotional roller coaster." "Sophia thinks I'm boring," he said quietly, and there it was, confirmation of what I'd suspected. "Sophia has never had to work for anything in her life," I said, and then immediately worried I'd been too harsh. But Marcus nodded like I'd said something he'd been thinking himself. "She told you about our fight?" he asked. "Fight." So it had escalated beyond just her private complaints to me. "She mentioned you two were going through a rough patch," I said carefully. "We're taking a break," Marcus said, and the defeat in his voice broke my heart. "She says she needs space to figure out what she wants. That maybe we want different things out of life." I wanted to tell him that Sophia didn't deserve him, that she was an idiot for not seeing how lucky she was. I wanted to tell him that any woman would be thrilled to have someone who brought her coffee in the morning and remembered her favorite books and made playlists just because a song reminded him of her. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry. That must be really hard." "Yeah," he said. "It is. The worst part is that I keep wondering if she's right, you know? If there really is something wrong with me, that I'm content with what we had, that I don't need constant excitement to be happy." "There's nothing wrong with you, Marcus," I said, and I put every ounce of sincerity I possessed into those words. "There's something wrong with a culture that tells us love should be exhausting. That if you're not fighting and making up and riding emotional waves, you're not really in love." He looked at me with something like wonder. "When did you get so wise?" "Maybe I always was," I said with a small smile. "I just never had the confidence to share my opinions before." We talked for another hour after that, about everything and nothing. Art, work, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel. It was the longest conversation Marcus and I had ever had without Sophia there to dominate it, and I was struck by how easy it was, how natural. We had more in common than I'd ever realized, the same dry sense of humor, similar taste in movies, a shared love of obscure indie bands. When he finally said he had to get back to work, I felt a stab of disappointment. "This was really nice," he said as we stood up. I needed this, to talk to someone who gets it. "Anytime," I said and meant it. "I mean that, Marcus. If you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here." He smiled, and for a moment it was the real smile I remembered, the one that lit up his whole face. "Thank you, Emma. Really." I watched him pack up his laptop and leave, my heart pounding with a mixture of elation and terror. The connection I'd felt, the way he'd looked at me, the easy conversation, it had all been real. There was something there, something that had always been there but had been overshadowed by Sophia's overwhelming presence. But I also knew I was playing with fire. Marcus was vulnerable right now, confused and hurting. The last thing I wanted was to take advantage of that, to be the rebound that helped him get over Sophia. I wanted more than that. I wanted to be the woman he chose, not because Sophia had rejected him, but because he genuinely preferred me. That meant I had to be patient. I had to continue my transformation, continue becoming the kind of woman who deserved someone like Marcus, and I had to wait for him to heal from whatever Sophia was putting him through. But for the first time since this whole thing started, I allowed myself to believe it might actually work. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of continued self-improvement and careful strategizing. I threw myself into perfecting my new image, spending hours practicing makeup techniques and experimenting with different styles. I worked with a personal shopper to refine my wardrobe, learning about color palettes and silhouettes and how to dress for my body type. But more importantly, I focused on developing the inner confidence to match my outer transformation. I read books on psychology and social dynamics, studied the subtle art of conversation and connection. I practiced being the kind of person who could hold her own in any social situation, who could be charming and engaging and memorable. And I kept tabs on Marcus and Sophia's break, through careful observation and strategic questioning. It didn't take long to figure out that their break was really just Sophia's way of keeping Marcus on hold while she explored other options. She was dating and not being subtle about it. She'd post photos on social media from expensive restaurants with mysterious new men, always carefully cropped so you couldn't see their faces, but could see the luxury watches and designer clothes. Marcus, meanwhile, was throwing himself into his work and spending most of his free time at the gym or hiking alone. The few times I saw him, always carefully orchestrated accidental encounters, he looked increasingly tired and defeated. It was clear that Sophia's strategy was working exactly as she'd intended. She was keeping Marcus available as a backup option while she searched for someone more exciting, and he was too decent and loyal to move on completely while they were supposedly just taking a break. The whole situation made me furious, but it also presented an opportunity. Marcus was slowly realizing that Sophia didn't value him the way he deserved to be valued. He was starting to question whether their relationship had ever been as solid as he'd thought, and he was beginning to see me in a different light, not just as Sophia's plain friend, but as a person in my own right. I just had to be careful not to push too hard, too fast. The breakthrough came 4 months into my transformation, at Sophia's birthday party. She'd decided to throw herself a big celebration at an upscale rooftop bar downtown, and of course I was invited. As her best friend, it would have been suspicious if I hadn't shown up. But this was also going to be my debut, in a way. The first time I'd appear in our old social circle with my complete transformation. The first time I'd see Marcus in a social setting since our coffee shop conversation. The first time I'd have to face Sophia while knowing exactly what I was planning. I spent days preparing for that party, treating it like a military operation. I had my hair done professionally the day before, getting a subtle but noticeable update to my cut and color. I spent 2 hours on my makeup, creating a look that was dramatic enough for evening but still felt authentically me. I bought a new dress, a deep emerald green that brought out my eyes and fit my newly toned body like it had been made for me. When I looked in the mirror before leaving my apartment, I barely recognized myself. The woman looking back was sophisticated, confident, beautiful. She looked like someone who belonged at upscale parties, someone who could hold her own in any conversation, someone who could walk into a room and make people stop and stare. The transformation was complete. The party was already in full swing when I arrived, the rooftop packed with Sophia's extensive social circle. I paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath and reminding myself of everything I'd practiced. Posture straight, chin up, confident smile. I was no longer Emma, the invisible friend. I was someone new, someone worthy of attention and respect. The first person to notice me was Jake, a guy from our college friend group who had never so much as made eye contact with me before. "Excuse me," he said, stepping into my path with a slightly bewildered expression. "I'm sorry, do we know each other? You look incredibly familiar." "Hi, Jake," I said with a warm smile. "It's Emma Chen." His jaw literally dropped. "Emma? Holy shit, Emma, what happened to you? You look different?" I supplied. "You look amazing," he said, his eyes clearly taking in every detail of my transformation. "Like seriously amazing. I almost didn't recognize you." "Thank you," I said gracefully. "That's very sweet of you to say." "No, I mean it. You look like you could be a model or something." "Has anyone ever told you that you have incredible eyes?" I had to bite back a laugh. This was the same guy who had looked right through me for years, who had once asked Sophia if I was actually friends with her or just someone who hung around. Now he was hitting on me like I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "That's very flattering," I said. "I should go find Sophia and wish her happy birthday." "Yeah, of course," Jake said quickly. "But maybe we could catch up later? I'd love to hear what you've been up to." I gave him a mysterious smile and moved deeper into the party, hyper-aware of the way conversations seemed to pause as I passed, the way eyes followed me across the room. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I spotted Sophia near the bar, holding court with a group of friends and looking predictably stunning in a white designer dress that probably cost more than my rent. She was in the middle of some story, gesturing dramatically with a martini glass, when she caught sight of me. Her expression went through several rapid changes: confusion, recognition, shock, and something that looked almost like fear. She excused herself from her group and walked over to me, her smile bright but her eyes calculating. "Emma!" she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheeks. "Oh my God, look at you. You look so different." "Thank you," I said smoothly. "Happy birthday, Sophia. You look beautiful as always." "Thank you, honey," she said, but I could see her studying every detail of my appearance, trying to figure out exactly what had changed. "I love what you've done with your hair. And that dress is gorgeous. Where did you get it?" "Just a little boutique downtown," I said vaguely. "You know how it is when you finally decide to invest in yourself." Something flickered across her face at those words, but before she could respond, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Emma?" I turned around, and there was Marcus, looking handsome in a dark button-down shirt and jeans. But more importantly, he was looking at me with the same shock and admiration I'd been seeing all night. "Hi, Marcus," I said, my heart racing despite all my preparation. "How are you?" "Wow," he said, his eyes wide. "You look incredible." "I mean, you always look great, but this is—" "Thank you," I said, stepping closer to him. "That's very sweet." I was hyper-aware of Sophia watching our interaction, of the way her eyes narrowed slightly when Marcus's gaze lingered on me. This was the moment I'd been planning for, the test of whether 4 months of transformation had been enough to shift the dynamic between the three of us. "I was just about to get a drink," Marcus said. "Would you like to join me?" "I'd love to," I said, allowing him to guide me toward the bar with his hand lightly touching my lower back. As we walked away, I caught a glimpse of Sophia's face. The confident, self-assured expression she usually wore had been replaced by something I'd never seen before: uncertainty. For the first time in her life, she was watching someone else command the attention she was used to receiving. For the first time, she was the one being left behind. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. The bar was crowded, but Marcus somehow managed to get the bartender's attention immediately. I realized this was another small indicator of how much he'd changed in my perception, or maybe how much I'd changed in his. The old Emma would have stood there invisible while he ordered. The new Emma was the kind of woman men noticed, catered to, made space for. "What would you like?" Marcus asked, leaning close so I could hear him over the music. His proximity made my skin tingle, and I caught a hint of his cologne, something warm and masculine that made me want to step even closer. "Surprise me," I said, meeting his eyes with a confidence I was still getting used to. "I trust your judgment." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes. "One surprise coming up?" He turned to the bartender and ordered something I couldn't quite hear over the noise, but I found myself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell slightly across his forehead. When had I started noticing these details so acutely? When had being near him become so intoxicating? "So," he said, turning back to me while we waited for our drinks, "I have to ask, what's behind this incredible transformation?" And don't say it's just a haircut because this is... He gestured vaguely at me, his expression almost awed. This is like watching someone become completely different overnight. Not overnight, I said with a slight smile. It's been months in the making. I told you before, I got tired of blending into the background. But why now? He pressed. What changed? I considered how to answer that. I couldn't tell him the truth, that seeing how casually Sophia dismissed his worth had sparked something fierce and protective in me. That watching her take him for granted while I would have treasured every moment with him had made me realize I needed to stop accepting less than I deserved. That every change I'd made had been motivated by the desperate hope that maybe, someday, he might look at me the way he used to look at her. Instead, I said, sometimes you reach a breaking point, a moment where you realize you've been living your life for everyone else's comfort instead of your own happiness. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his eyes. I know that feeling, he said quietly. I've been having a lot of those moments lately. The bartender slid our drinks across the bar, something pink and sophisticated looking for me, a whiskey neat for Marcus. He picked up both glasses and nodded toward a quieter corner of the rooftop. Want to get some air? I followed him to the edge of the rooftop, away from the crowd. The city sparkled below us, and there was just enough of a breeze to make the evening feel magical. Or maybe that was just the way Marcus was looking at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. This is nice, I said, taking a sip of my drink. It was perfectly balanced, sweet but complex, with just enough alcohol to make me feel warm and confident. It is, Marcus agreed, but he was looking at me, not the view. Emma, can I say something? Of course. I feel like I owe you an apology, he said, his expression serious. All these years I think I've been, blind to who you really are. You were always just Sophia's friend to me, you know? I never really saw you as your own person. My heart started beating faster. This was dangerous territory that could expose feelings I wasn't ready to reveal. You don't owe me an apology for that, I said carefully. I think I do, he insisted, especially after our conversation at the coffee shop. You gave me this incredible perspective on things, made me feel less crazy for wanting what I want. And tonight, seeing you like this, he shook his head. I keep thinking about all the conversations we never had, all the times I probably talked over you or around you instead of to you. Marcus, I said softly, you were always kind to me. Always. That's more than most people bothered with. Kind, he repeated, and there was something bitter in his tone. That's what Sophia says about me too. That I'm kind, safe, predictable. He took a long sip of his whiskey. Apparently those aren't qualities women find particularly attractive. My chest tightened with anger on his behalf. Even now, even while she was across the rooftop probably flirting with whatever new conquest she'd brought as her date, Sophia was still in his head, still making him doubt his worth. Sophia doesn't know what she's talking about, I said, and there was more heat in my voice than I'd intended. She's never had to appreciate anything because everything has always come easily to her. She's never had to recognize the value of consistency because she's never experienced its absence. Marcus turned to look at me fully, his green eyes intense in the dim lighting. You sound angry, he said, and there was surprise in his voice. I was angry. Furious, actually. Months of watching him doubt himself because of her casual cruelty, of seeing him try to change who he was to win back someone who didn't deserve him in the first place. But I couldn't let that anger show too much, couldn't reveal how deeply I'd been affected by his pain. I just think she's being incredibly foolish, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I stopped myself before I said too much. I'm what? Marcus asked, stepping closer. You're exactly the kind of man any reasonable woman would want, I said quietly. Loyal, thoughtful, genuine. You remember the little things that matter. You show up when you say you will. You listen when people talk to you. Those aren't character flaws, Marcus. Those are the foundations of real love. Something shifted in his expression as I spoke, a vulnerability that made my breath catch. Emma, he said, his voice rough, how is it that Sophia's best friend understands me better than she does? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications that made my heart race. This was the moment where I could either deflect and keep things safe, or take a risk that could change everything. Maybe, I said, meeting his eyes. It's because I've been paying attention. The words were barely above a whisper, but I saw the impact they had on him. His eyes widened slightly, and I could see him processing what I'd just implied. That I'd been watching him, noticing him, seeing him in ways that Sophia never bothered to. Emma, he started. But before he could finish the thought, a familiar voice interrupted us. "There you are!" Sophia appeared beside us with her usual perfect timing, her smile bright but her eyes sharp as they took in how close Marcus and I were standing. I was wondering where my two favorite people had disappeared to. The possessive way she said it, my two favorite people, wasn't lost on me. She was marking her territory, reminding both Marcus and me of our designated roles in her life. Marcus as her boyfriend on indefinite hold, and me as her loyal sidekick. "Just getting some air," Marcus said, but I noticed he didn't step away from me. If anything, he seemed to move slightly closer, a subtle but significant shift. "Well, you're missing the party," Sophia said, linking her arm through Marcus's with practiced ease. "Come on, I want to introduce you to some people." I watched Marcus's face as she pulled him back toward the crowd. He looked torn, frustrated, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. Just before they reached the main party area, he glanced back at me with an expression that made my heart flutter with hope. I spent the next hour watching Sophia work the room with Marcus in tow, but something was different. She was performing harder than usual, laughing louder, touching him more frequently, making sure everyone could see that he was still hers. But Marcus looked uncomfortable with the display, and I caught him looking for me more than once across the crowd. The real shift came when Sophia's date for the evening finally made himself known. I'd been wondering who she'd brought, since she'd clearly come with someone but hadn't introduced him to anyone. The answer became clear when she disappeared for 20 minutes and returned looking slightly disheveled, followed shortly after by a tall, dark-haired man who I recognized as one of the bartenders from a trendy downtown club. Sophia was cheating, openly, brazenly, at her own birthday party, with Marcus standing 20 feet away. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She was so confident in her hold over him, so sure that he would wait around indefinitely while she explored her options, that she wasn't even bothering to be discreet about it. But Marcus noticed. I saw the moment he put the pieces together, saw his face go through shock, hurt, and then something harder, determination maybe. Or just the final death of whatever illusions he'd been holding on to about their relationship. He made his way over to where I was standing near the edge of the party, his expression grim. "Emma," he said, "can we talk? Somewhere private?" I nodded, setting down my drink and following him to a quieter section of the rooftop. The party noise faded to a distant hum, and the city lights twinkled below us like fallen stars. "Did you see that?" he asked without preamble. "The show she just put on with her bartender friend?" "Marcus," I said carefully, "I don't think it's my place to—" "She's cheating on me," he said flatly, "at her own birthday party, while I'm standing right there. And the worst part is, I'm not even surprised. I think part of me has known for weeks that this break was just her way of keeping me as a backup option while she shopped around." My heart ached for him. The pain in his voice was raw, real, and I wanted nothing more than to wrap my arms around him and tell him that he deserved so much better. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry, Marcus. That's incredibly cruel of her. You know what the really pathetic part is?" he continued. "I was actually considering fighting for her, trying to become more exciting, more spontaneous, whatever she said she wanted. I thought maybe if I changed enough I could win her back. You shouldn't have to change who you are for someone to love you," I said softly. "That's what you said before at the coffee shop. And you were right." He turned to look at me, his eyes reflecting the party lights. "You've been right about a lot of things lately." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. I could feel we were approaching another one of those moments, another opportunity to either play it safe or take a risk that could change everything. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. "Anything. Earlier when you said you'd been paying attention, what did you mean by that?" My mouth went dry. This was it, the moment where I either backed down or told him at least part of the truth. I thought about all the months of transformation, all the work I'd put into becoming someone worthy of his attention. I thought about Sophia across the rooftop, probably making out with her bartender while assuming Marcus would still be there waiting for her whenever she decided she was done playing. "I meant," I said, taking a deep breath, "that I've always seen who you really are. Not the version Sophia gets bored with, but the real you. The man who remembers that I take my coffee with oat milk and no sugar. Who asks about my art projects and actually listens to the answers? Who volunteers at the animal shelter because you think it's important, not because it looks good on social media?" Marcus stared at me, his expression shifting through surprise, understanding, and something that looked like wonder. "Emma," he said quietly. "How long have you—" "A long time," I admitted. "Longer than I should have, probably. Longer than was smart or fair to anyone involved. Why didn't you ever say anything?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Marcus. Look at how this has played out." I was Sophia's plain best friend, the ugly friend she kept around to make herself feel better by comparison. You were completely in love with her, and I was invisible. What was I supposed to say? "You were never invisible to me," Marcus said, stepping closer. "Maybe I didn't see everything I should have, but you were never invisible. Wasn't I?" I challenged. "How many times did we have dinner together, the three of us, and you forgot I was there? How many conversations did you have with Sophia about problems in your relationship while I sat right next to you, offering advice you never actually heard?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him replaying interactions in his mind, seeing them from my perspective for the first time. "God," he said finally. "I was such an idiot." "You weren't an idiot," I said. "You were in love. People in love don't see everything clearly." "And now?" he asked. "What do you see when you look at me now?" The question was loaded, dangerous, full of possibilities that both thrilled and terrified me. I could deflect again, keep things safe, preserve our friendship, and avoid risking everything on feelings that might not be reciprocated. Or I could be brave. I could take the leap I'd been building toward for months. "I see someone who deserves to be chosen," I said. "Every day. Not kept as a backup option or taken for granted. I see someone who's kind without being weak, consistent without being boring. I see someone who would never make the person he loves doubt their worth the way Sophia has made you doubt yours." "Emma," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I see someone I could fall in love with," I continued, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Someone I probably already have fallen in love with, if I'm being completely honest." The words hung between us in the night air, irrevocable and terrifying. I'd done it. I'd finally said it out loud, laid my feelings bare in a way I could never take back. Now all I could do was wait and see if I'd just destroyed everything or opened the door to something beautiful. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Emma," he said again, and this time my name sounded different in his voice, like a prayer or a revelation. "I know this is complicated," I said quickly, suddenly desperate to fill the silence. "I know you're still processing things with Sophia, and the last thing I want is to be a rebound or a way to get back at her. I needed you to know. After tonight, after seeing how she treats you, I couldn't keep pretending I didn't care." "A rebound," Marcus repeated, and there was something almost amused in his tone. "Emma, do you have any idea how long I've been trying to figure out why conversations with you feel so much easier than conversations with Sophia? Why I started looking forward to the times when it was just the three of us because it meant I'd get to hear your thoughts on things?" My breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe I've been falling for you too, and I was just too stupid or too loyal to Sophia to admit it to myself." He reached up to cut my face with one hand, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "I'm saying that when I saw you tonight looking like this, confident and beautiful and completely yourself, it wasn't just attraction I felt, it was recognition. Like I was finally seeing clearly for the first time." "Marcus," I whispered, leaning into his touch. "I don't want to be another guy who only notices you after you change your appearance," he said. "That's not what this is about. You were always beautiful, Emma. You were always worth noticing." I was looking in the wrong direction. Before I could respond, before I could tell him that his noticing me now was enough, that I didn't care about the timeline as long as we'd found our way to each other, he leaned down and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative like he was asking permission, but when I kissed him back, when I let my hands find their way to the back of his neck and pulled him closer, the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and setting the world on fire at the same time. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. Marcus rested his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed. "This is crazy," he said. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be kissing Sophia's best friend, 6 months ago I would have said it was impossible too, I said. "But here we are, he agreed, opening his eyes to look at me. "Emma, I need you to know, this isn't about getting back at Sophia. This isn't about her at all, actually. This is about you and me and figuring out what this could be." "I know," I said, and I meant it. Whatever had started as a plan for revenge had transformed into something real, something worth pursuing for its own sake. "I want to figure it out too." Marcus smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen on his face in months. "Good," he said, "because I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to do this again." "Kiss me?" I asked teasingly. "Everything," he said. "Talk to you, laugh with you, get to know the real Emma instead of the version who was always holding herself back. All of it." Before I could respond, we were interrupted by the sound of heels clicking rapidly across the rooftop toward us. I turned to see Sophia approaching, her expression stormy and her movements sharp with barely controlled anger. "There you are," she said, her voice tight with false cheer. "I've been looking everywhere for you two. The party's winding down, and I wanted to say goodbye before people started leaving." I could see her taking in the scene. Marcus and me standing close together, the intimate way we were looking at each other, the slight flush in both our faces that suggested we'd been doing more than just talking. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Are you okay, Soph?" I asked innocently. "You look a little stressed." "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was strained, just tired. "It's been a long night." She turned to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marcus, honey, can I talk to you for a second?" "Privately?" I felt Marcus tense beside me, but he nodded. "Sure," he said. "Emma, will you wait for me? I'd like to continue our conversation." The way he said it, like our conversation was important, like I was important, sent a thrill through me. And the look on Sophia's face when she heard it was almost worth the months of planning and preparation. "Of course," I said, giving him a smile that was probably a little too satisfied. "Take your time." I watched them walk a short distance away, far enough for privacy, but close enough that I could observe their body language. Sophia was animated, gesturing as she spoke, leaning into Marcus's space the way she always did when she wanted to reassert control. But Marcus looked different. His posture was straighter, more confident. He wasn't leaning away from her, but he wasn't leaning in either. He looked like a man who had finally seen clearly and couldn't be convinced to close his eyes again. Their conversation lasted about 10 minutes, and I could see the exact moment when Sophia realized she'd lost. Her confident facade cracked, her gestures became more desperate, and her voice, what I could hear of it, took on a pleading quality I'd never heard from her before. But Marcus remained steady, unmoved by whatever arguments she was making. When they walked back toward me, Sophia's perfect composure was hanging by a thread. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "Emma," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "I think we need to talk. Soon. Just the two of us." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Whenever you'd like." "Tomorrow," Sophia said. "Come to my apartment tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss." There was a threat underlying her words, a promise of confrontation that would have terrified the old Emma. But the new Emma, confident, transformed, finally seeing clearly, wasn't afraid of Sophia anymore. If anything, I was looking forward to the conversation. It was time for some truths to come out. "I'll be there," I said. "Say 10 o'clock?" Sophia nodded curtly, then turned to Marcus. "This isn't over," she said quietly, but I heard it. "You'll realize you're making a mistake." "No, Sophia," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "I don't think I will." She stared at him for a long moment, then at me, her expression cycling through hurt, anger, and something that looked almost like respect. Finally, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the rooftop as she rejoined what remained of her party. Marcus and I left together 20 minutes later, the party finally winding down around us. We walked slowly through the city streets, neither of us eager to end the evening, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed as easily as it had in the coffee shop, but now there was an undercurrent of possibility, of romance, that made every exchange feel charged with meaning. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Marcus asked as we reached my building. "About talking to Sophia?" I considered the question. "No, actually. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Long overdue, really. She's not going to take this well," Marcus warned. "Sophia doesn't like losing, and she's definitely not used to losing to you. No offense." "None taken," I said with a laugh. "And you're right, she's not going to handle this gracefully. But Marcus, she lost me a long time ago. She just doesn't know it yet." He studied my face in the dim streetlight. "What do you mean?" "I mean that this, us, wasn't just some spontaneous decision. I've been planning this for months. The transformation, the timing, all of it. Sophia showed me exactly what she thought of me, and I decided I was done accepting that assessment." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. "You planned this," he said slowly. The makeover, becoming confident, everything? I did. I felt a flicker of nervousness. Would he be upset that I'd manipulated the situation? Would he feel like I'd tricked him somehow? But Marcus surprised me. Instead of anger or hurt, his expression shifted to something that looked almost like admiration. "Emma," he said, "that's incredible. You saw what you wanted and you went after it. You didn't just accept the role Sophia assigned you, you rewrote the entire script. Are you okay with that?" I asked. "That this wasn't just a happy accident? Are you kidding?" Marcus stepped closer, his hands finding my waist. "Do you know how attractive it is that you fought for this? That you believed enough in yourself and in us to transform your entire life?" Relief flooded through me. "So you don't feel manipulated?" "I feel chosen," Marcus said, echoing words I'd said to him earlier. "For the first time in months, maybe years, I feel like someone chose me. Not settled for me, not kept me as a backup option, but actually chose me. That's not manipulation, Emma. That's the most honest thing anyone's ever done for me." He kissed me again then, right there on the sidewalk outside my building, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. This was a kiss full of promise and possibility, a kiss that tasted like new beginnings and sweet revenge in equal measure. When we broke apart, Marcus smiled at me with an expression that was pure happiness. "I should let you get some rest," he said. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah," I agreed. "The final confrontation. Are you going to tell her everything?" Marcus asked. "About the planning? About how long you've felt this way?" I considered the question. Part of me wanted to lay it all out for Sophia, to make sure she understood exactly how thoroughly she'd underestimated me. But another part of me thought that the truth might be even more devastating. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to tell her the truth. That you chose me. That when given a real choice between us, you picked the girl she always thought wasn't good enough. I think that will hurt more than any elaborate revelation about planning or revenge." Marcus nodded. "Just be careful, okay? Sophia can be vicious when she's cornered." "I know," I said. "I've seen her destroy other people when she felt threatened. But Marcus, I'm not other people. I know all her secrets, all her vulnerabilities. If she wants to play dirty, I'm more than ready." There was something dark in my voice that made Marcus look at me with new eyes. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said, but he was smiling. "Just don't take me for granted," I said, only half joking. "That's all I ask." "Never," Marcus said seriously. "Emma, after tonight, after everything, I promise you, I will never take you for granted." I believed him, and as I watched him walk away into the night, I felt a satisfaction so complete it was almost overwhelming. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Marcus was mine, not by default, not as a rebound, but by choice. Tomorrow would bring Sophia's wrath, her attempts to reclaim what she'd thrown away. But it was too late for that. She'd shown her hand, revealed her true feelings, and lost the best thing that had ever happened to her in the process. The next morning, I took extra care with my appearance. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, that battle had already been won, but because I wanted to look like the kind of woman who could steal another woman's man and feel good about it. I chose a simple but elegant outfit, did my makeup perfectly, and styled my hair in loose waves that caught the light beautifully. At exactly 10 o'clock, I knocked on Sophia's apartment door. She answered immediately, like she'd been waiting by the entrance. She was dressed casually in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun, and for the first time in our friendship, she looked less put together than I did. It was a small detail, but it felt significant. "Come in," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I made coffee, thank you," I said, following her into the living room. The apartment was immaculate as always, filled with expensive furniture and carefully curated art pieces. It looked like something out of a magazine. Beautiful but cold, perfect but somehow lacking in personality. Sophia handed me a mug of coffee and settled into the chair across from me, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You look good," she said finally. "Different, but good." "Thank you." "Emma," Sophia said, leaning forward slightly, "we need to talk about what happened last night. About you and Marcus. What about us?" I asked innocently. "Don't play dumb with me," Sophia snapped, her composure cracking slightly. "I saw how you were looking at each other. I saw the way he was touching you. Something happened between you two." "Yes," I agreed. "Something did happen." Sophia waited for me to elaborate, but I simply sipped my coffee and watched her. I could see her frustration growing, her need to control the narrative warring with her inability to get me to play along with whatever script she had in mind. "Emma," she said finally. Marcus is confused right now. He's hurt and angry about our break, and he's not thinking clearly. You can't take advantage of that. Take advantage of him? I repeated. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're a good friend who's trying to comfort someone who's hurting, Sophia said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. But Emma, honey, you have to be realistic about this. Marcus and I have history. We have a connection that goes back years. This thing with you, it's just a rebound. A way for him to feel better about himself after our fight. I set down my coffee cup and looked at her directly. Sophia, I said calmly, Marcus broke up with you last night. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and I saw her hands tremble slightly before she clasped them together in her lap. No, she said. We're taking a break. We're figuring things out. You were taking a break, I corrected. He was trying to win you back. But after last night, after seeing you with your bartender friend, he realized that you'd already checked out of the relationship. So he ended it. Officially. That's not... Sophia started, then stopped. I could see her replaying her conversation with Marcus from the night before, seeing it from this new perspective. He told me he loved me. I continued, watching her face carefully. He said he's been falling for me for months, but was too loyal to you to admit it to himself. He said that when he looks at me, he sees someone who chooses him every day, not someone who keeps him around as a backup option. Each word was carefully chosen, designed to cut deep. I was telling her the truth, but I was also making sure she understood the magnitude of what she'd lost and how thoroughly she'd been replaced. You're lying, Sophia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? I asked. When's the last time Marcus looked at you the way he was looking at me last night? When's the last time he seemed genuinely excited to talk to you, to spend time with you? When's the last time you felt like he was choosing you instead of just going through the motions? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her thinking back through recent interactions with Marcus, seeing them with new clarity. This is insane, she said finally. Emma, this is Marcus we're talking about. My Marcus. The guy who's been in love with me for 2 years. Your Marcus? I repeated. Sophia, you don't get to claim ownership over another human being. And you definitely don't get to keep someone on hold while you shop around for something better. I wasn't shopping around, Sophia protested, but we both knew it was a lie. Really? I asked. What about the bartender from last night? What about all those mysterious dinner dates you've been posting on social media? What about the fact that you told me 3 months ago that you were bored with Marcus and looking for something more exciting? Sophia's mouth fell open slightly. She'd forgotten about that conversation, about the cruel way she'd dismissed Marcus's worth. Emma, I was just venting. You know how it is. Sometimes you get frustrated in relationships and say things you don't mean. But you did mean it, I said quietly. You meant every word. You thought Marcus was too predictable, too safe, too boring. You thought he was the kind of man someone like me would settle for, not the kind of man someone like you should want. The truth hung between us like a blade. Sophia's face went through several expressions: denial, recognition, embarrassment, and finally, anger. So what? She said, her voice getting louder. So what if I said those things? Everyone has doubts in relationships. Everyone wonders if they could do better. That doesn't mean I didn't love him. Love him? I laughed, and there was no warmth in it. Sophia, you don't love Marcus. You love the idea of him. You love having someone devoted to you, someone reliable you can count on while you play around. You love the security of knowing he'll always be there, waiting for you to decide he's worth your time. That's not true? Sophia said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Isn't it? I leaned forward, my voice getting softer and more dangerous. Tell me, Sophia, when's the last time you did something thoughtful for Marcus? When's the last time you asked about his work, his dreams, his fears? When's the last time you made him feel like he was the most important person in your world? Sophia opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her trying to think of examples, trying to remember moments of genuine care and attention she'd shown Marcus. The silence stretched between us. I thought so, I said. But I can tell you all of those things about him. I know he's afraid his graphic design work isn't creative enough, that he sometimes feels like he's selling out by doing corporate projects instead of pursuing his own art. I know he volunteers at the animal shelter because his childhood dog was a rescue and he wants to give back. I know he takes his coffee black in the morning but likes caramel macchiatos in the afternoon. I know he has a scar on his left hand from when he tried to build a treehouse when he was 8 and fell off the ladder. With each detail I shared, Sophia's face grew paler. These were things a girlfriend should know, intimate details that came from years of paying attention, of actually caring about someone's inner life. I know, I continued, that his favorite movie is actually The Princess Bride, even though he pretends it's The Godfather because he thinks it makes him sound more sophisticated. I know he writes poetry sometimes, late at night when he can't sleep, and that he's never shown it to anyone because he's afraid it's not good enough. How do you... Sophia started, then stopped. The answer was obvious. I knew these things because I'd been listening, really listening, for years. While she'd been half present in their relationship, I'd been cataloging every detail Marcus shared, treasuring every glimpse into his inner world. The difference between us, I said, standing up, is that I see Marcus for who he really is, and I love all of it. You see him as a collection of convenient qualities and boring limitations. You never deserved him, Sophia. And deep down, I think you know that. Sophia shot to her feet, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking completely. How dare you? She said, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you sit in my apartment and tell me what I do and don't deserve? You think because you got a makeover and some confidence you can just steal my boyfriend? I didn't steal anything, I said calmly. You threw him away. I just made sure he landed somewhere safe. This is unbelievable, Sophia said, pacing across the room. My best friend, stabbing me in the back over a man. I trusted you, Emma. I told you everything, shared all my secrets with you, and this is how you repay me. Your secrets? I repeated. You mean like how you've been cheating on Marcus for weeks? Like how you only kept me around because having an ugly friend made you feel better about yourself? Like how you've never seen me as a real person, just as a convenient audience for your drama? Sophia stopped pacing and stared at me. That's not... I never said you were ugly. You didn't have to say it, I replied. It was in every pitying look, every time you offered to help me with my appearance, every time you talked about how lucky I was that I didn't have to deal with the complications of being desired by men. You made it clear that you saw me as fundamentally inferior, fundamentally unworthy of the kind of love you took for granted. Emma, that's not how I meant it, Sophia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I asked. Remember 3 months ago when you told me Marcus was too boring for you? You said he was the kind of man someone like me would settle for. Someone like me, Sophia. What did you mean by that? She was quiet, unable or unwilling to explain what we both knew she'd meant. You meant, I continued, that I was the kind of person who should be grateful for scraps. The kind of person who didn't deserve passion or excitement or real love. The settling type, remember? That's what you called me. I was upset, Sophia said weakly. I was frustrated with my relationship and I said things I didn't mean. But you did mean them, I said. And that's when I realized that our entire friendship was based on a lie. You never saw me as an equal, Sophia. You saw me as a supporting character in your story, the loyal sidekick who would always be there to make you feel better about yourself. Sophia sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her. For the first time in our entire friendship, she looked small, vulnerable, uncertain. So what now? She asked quietly. You get Marcus and I get nothing? You get exactly what you chose, I said. You chose to take him for granted. You chose to cheat on him. You chose to treat him like he wasn't good enough for you. And you chose to treat me like I wasn't good enough for basic respect. These are the consequences of those choices. And Marcus just goes along with this? Sophia asked, a hint of her old fire returning. He just abandons 2 years of history for someone he barely knows. He knows me, I said. He's always known me. You were just too self-centered to notice that while you were busy performing your relationship for social media, Marcus and I were actually talking, really talking, about art and dreams and fears and all the things that matter. I picked up my purse and moved toward the door. Sophia, I genuinely hope you find happiness. But I hope you find it with someone who appreciates the real you, not someone you have to manipulate or control to keep interested. And I hope you learn to see other people as complete human beings worthy of respect, not just as supporting characters in your personal drama. Emma, Sophia called as I reached the door. I turned back to look at her, and for a moment I saw a flash of the girl I'd been friends with for so many years. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost childlike in her confusion. Did you ever really care about me? She asked. Or was this all just some elaborate revenge plot? The question caught me off guard. I could have been cruel, could have told her that every moment of our friendship had been fake, every kindness calculated. But that would have been a lie, and despite everything, I didn't want to lie to her. I loved you, I said honestly. For years, I genuinely loved you as a friend. I would have done anything for you, defended you against anyone, supported you through anything. But Sophia, love has to be mutual to survive, and you never loved me back. You loved having me around, loved the way I made you feel about yourself, but you never loved me as a person." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Maybe this will be good for you," I added. "Maybe losing Marcus will teach you to value the people in your life instead of taking them for granted. Maybe losing me will make you realize that friendship is supposed to be about mutual respect and care, not just having an audience for your life." I left then, closing the door quietly behind me. As I walked down the hallway toward the elevators, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly. Everything had gone exactly as I'd planned. Relief that the confrontation was over and I'd said everything I needed to say, but also surprisingly a kind of sadness. Despite everything, Sophia had been a huge part of my life for over a decade. Ending that relationship, even a toxic one, felt like closing a chapter of my life forever. But as I stepped out onto the street and felt the morning sun on my face, the sadness faded. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. For the first time in my life, I was free to be completely myself, to pursue what I wanted without apology or self-doubt. I had Marcus, I had my transformed confidence, and I had the knowledge that I was capable of fighting for what I believed I deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How did it go?" "It's over," I texted back. "All of it. The friendship, her hold on you, the old version of me. It's all over. Are you okay?" came his quick response. I thought about the question as I walked toward the coffee shop where we'd planned to meet after my conversation with Sophia. Was I okay? I'd just destroyed a friendship that had lasted over a decade. I'd systematically planned and executed a complete transformation of myself in order to steal another woman's boyfriend. I'd confronted someone I'd once loved with all their flaws and cruelties and watched them crumble under the weight of truth. By most standards, I should probably feel guilty or at least conflicted about what I'd done, but instead I felt free, lighter than I had in years, like I'd finally stopped carrying weight that had never been mine to bear. "I'm perfect," I texted back. "See you in 10 minutes. And I was, for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with exactly who I wanted to be there with, living exactly the life I'd chosen for myself. The ugly friend was gone forever, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wouldn't accept anything less than she deserved. It had taken months of planning, transformation, and strategic patience. It had required me to become someone completely new while staying true to who I'd always been underneath. It had meant destroying relationships and burning bridges and accepting that some people would see me as the villain in this story. But as I saw Marcus waiting for me outside the coffee shop, his face lighting up with genuine happiness when he spotted me, I knew it had all been worth it. Every workout, every makeup tutorial, every moment of doubt and determination had led to this: a man who chose me, completely and without reservation. A life where I was the main character instead of the supporting cast. A future full of possibilities instead of limitations. Sophia had been right about one thing. I was the settling type, but not in the way she'd meant it. I was the type who would never settle for less than I deserved ever again.